All right. Hey, welcome back to the Go for CEO channel. This is John the Bomb. Building others means business. And hey, welcome to 2025. Exciting time. The last couple months of 2024, man, in America at least, and wherever you're watching this, we had an election, a lot of crazy things going on, a lot of interesting things, but the future does look bright. My two words for the year are vision and imagination. And when I met this lady that you're going to be hearing from today. It was really cool. We were at a networking event, started to talk to her. She comes from a very prestigious background and where she was working and stuff like that. And always, when you hear this word Harvard, you're like, oh, that's impressive, right? But it was more impressive to talk to her and what her views are and what she's looking to do. So, Conversation EQ and Ann Grason, thank you so much for coming to the Go for CEO channel. How are you?
I'm great, John. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's definitely been a crazy year, and I'm excited for things ahead.
Awesome, awesome. Well, yeah, it's one of these times I think as a human being, you take mile markers in life, and the new year always gives us all a perspective like, oh, okay, we could start again, or we could do this, or we could do that. So it's an interesting time. So, hey, conversation EQ, such a cool concept. I think it's really interesting for our community to really learn how someone ideated an idea and then how they go from corporate, which you had a really nice corporate type job and really interesting and in the development side and the name behind it, to now wanting to go on your own and all that type of stuff. So would love to hear a little bit of that story, and then we'll dive into some of the mechanisms of your business and what you're doing nowadays.
Sure, great. So yeah, it is an interesting name. And there's a story behind it, really, when you think about, kind of communication in general. So Conversation EQ is a communication training organization that specializes in really having more influence and better collaboration, focused on those employees that have high technical expertise or high domain expertise. And the reason that, I named this organization Conversation EQ is because I think originally, if you go back 20 years, particularly technology employees were hired for what they knew. So that IQ, what did you have in terms of accreditations and licenses and technical expertise? However, more and more as digital solutions really started taking the forefront in an overall organization's innovations for tomorrow, you saw these people needing to be more in the spotlight in terms of, leading what's going to be in the pipeline 10 years from now from a product standpoint. And so more and more, you know, important was importance was placed on that EQ, so that emotional intelligence versus just that, technology, information, and education that they bring, so much value to organizations. But really, what gives it legs is really knowing how to communicate, how to collaborate, etc.
It's interesting. I took a class on EQ, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. It was right before I left Fifth Third Bank, where I used to work as a business bank, commercial banker, and went on my own. And I remember that class just because I didn't really understand. I guess I knew some semblance of it because I've been in sales all my life, so I get the relating to people, and I guess the non I guess scholastic way of talking about emotional intelligence and stuff like that, right? So I kind of had a basis, but it's interesting that you developed a whole business around an industry that then talks about this specific thing and how you could help. So really specialized. What made you really kind of have such a specific focal point when you look at your business?
Yeah, so it's really playing on my experience, John. So many years ago, I was a communication facilitator and presentation skills, sales training, things like that. And through my own personal experience in sales, like you, I've done most of my career. I've worked in teams with a lot of people that bring a lot of detailed expertise to the table, but are not in a sales role. And then I've also coached people in a presentation skills course, for example, that struggle with netting things out. So you would take a group of, say, 10 to 12 people, they'd all learn the skills, they'd, come out. But I felt that there were the technology employees that always struggled the most because they're hired to know detail.
Mm,
And so, in really being more succinct was a bigger challenge for them. So that was one. Also, because organizations place so much value on getting people more and more technology background skills, et cetera, they really overlook those softer skills. I hate to use that word because they're some of the hardest skills to really learn. But how do you really apply those softer communication skills that layer onto those technology skills to really make them more valuable? And when I would talk to some of my existing clients and people in the business and the industry and ask them about what they were experiencing in corporate America or in their divisions, there was not one person who didn't tell me, we absolutely need this. And
mm,
when you look around, it was really an untapped industry. And so I decided to create an offering geared toward this group of high domain expertise, helping them be more succinct, communicate more effectively, collaborate with their colleagues, and be influential. So when you think about an engineer, for example, that really needs to get budget to experience with a prototype for a new product within a large organization, typically they're asking for funding from somebody who doesn't have that technical expertise. And so there's a real disconnect between really doing a sales call with somebody and meeting them where they are and really doing that an audience analysis, that EQ work to understand and be prepared to give them the exact type of information that's really going to make that meeting go as well as it possibly can.
interesting.
So just a little lengthier than I've already kind of gone into. When you look at the evolution of sort of these people in high domain expertise, I had already mentioned that they were hired for their IQ. But really, when you look at what happens over time, they have to have that social intelligence. They have to have that contextual intelligence. So, for example, I'm going to meet with somebody. What level in the organization are they? How will I meet them with the exact information that their role is going to find valuable? And so, all of these things sort of embody that EQ aspect of the organization and what I'm really trying to teach people to do differently.
Interesting. That last comment right there, I picked up. I kind of caught that. In my day-to-day side of the business, I deal with a lot of C-suite entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders of companies that are growing multi-million dollar companies. And, yeah, I mean, it's different than talking to a project manager that may have a budget of something that is in their division compared to talking to the CFO or the owner of the company that's running a $17 million company and they're looking to buy a commercial piece of real estate and they need finance for this. And maybe they're looking for capital for growth, those type of things. So it's interesting. I mean, I guess from a technical side, someone that's specifically like an engineer or an IT person, it's interesting to correlate both of those because typically I've seen, I know my buddies being a 90s kid, the guy that became the engineer had a sales guy that they both went to the sales meeting together, right? And he was the expert on the engineer side, and he's the sales guy, right? And he'd be like, "Oh no, you got to ask my engineer," and "Oh no, you got to ask." Well, the terms of it is on his side, right? So stuff like that. So, you know, I guess in general, Conversation AQ is a consulting business. Would that be the best way to kind of, I guess, categorize it in the industry or?
I would say that it's a training organization because,
Okay.
we do consulting up front and we do customize our solutions, which takes, conversations way in advance of rolling things out. But at the end of the day, we're teaching people how to be better at their jobs and saving organizations money because of improved communication.
Awesome. Okay. So, and I guess, in that scenario, what's kind of the ideal? So people that maybe watching this interview, think to themselves, oh, well, I only have 3 people on my staff that are technical. Or some people may go like, well, I've got 50 people. I really need, to talk to hands, right? Is there any level that you concentrate on, or is there a sweet spot that you look at as a kind of an ideal avatar of a client?
Yeah, I mean, we would want to make up a classroom so that it's economically, it makes sense. And so that's going to be anywhere from 10 to 20 that you would want to get in any given workshop. There's also a customization piece to putting this together. So you would want, probably at least 50 people to really make this, a win-win and actually be able to measure the difference, so there are organizations that do coaching, and they can coach to individual communication challenges that you have in a really small team. And I have a lot of those people that I work with that are strategic partners. But for what I do, you typically want to see a minimum of about 50 people that are in IT or
Okay.
engineering or any other technical role. It's interesting because originally this was positioned only to those divisions. I was talking with, highly technical organization heads. They would bring in their team members in subsequent conversations and they'd say, we need this for everybody. So that sort of changes the conversation as well, because I think it's communication is something that a lot of people struggle with that no one's really talking about in terms of the impact that it has on overall productivity for companies.
Hmm. So let's go a little bit deeper. I mean, obviously, lining up the I guess the educational part and understanding, what you could deliver, the timing of it, and then finding value in what you're going to be able to charge for what you believe you're worth, right? Compared to obviously your own selling of those companies to engage with you as a vendor. What has that dynamic been, coming from where you came from of corporately to then, going into your own business?
I think I would say it's pretty seamless. You know, it doesn't really make a difference if you're a smaller player um, than a bigger player in the training industry because the output is actually the same and the resources that you're putting into it are actually the same.
Mhm.
Where I think that it really benefits the client is that, again, you're able to be more, you're able to pivot and really bring in the resources in a more agile way to meet that client where they are.
Now, the vendor side of things, you mentioned it briefly a little bit earlier. How's that dynamic been? Did you initially, interview maybe three or four different types of vendors in a specific area, or have you had always a targeted plan to say, hey, I'm going to link up with this organization or that individual to be able to bring more value within the way that you're doing business?
Yeah, I would say that the vendor aspect of running an organization is probably some of the hardest work that you have to do. And I did a lot of that research up front. So some of it was, just asking people who are already ahead of me in business, who's the best, to work with in terms of what I'm ultimately trying to accomplish. And then there was some trial and error, things that I don't use anymore. So I would say that choosing your vendors is really, really important and not locking yourself into one avenue or resource. Because particularly today, I mean, there's so many great innovations every day and you want to be cutting edge.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did that answer
Technology is
your question?
definitely. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I think, technology is playing a big scope, especially with AI. And I think you got to be a little bit, um, you have to have a good discernment of not just getting sucked into, oh, it says AI, so it is AI, and that's exactly what it is, and machine learning and all that stuff.
Right.
So, because there are people out there taking advantage of, even in the learning space, like, hey, you're gonna be a multimillionaire learning these 18 AI things. I keep on seeing like some spots on my Instagram or whatever. Um, but it's interesting. So, you take a very interesting approach, and EQ is certainly such a developmental thing that all of us should learn from. From a business perspective, just to kind of go a little bit backwards, when you first started, what was some of the ways that you intentionally knew how to set yourself up for financial success? Because your sales cycle is a little bit longer, I would think. And please share deeper, what does that sales cycle look like for you? Not only from the context that you had prior, but moving forward, how you're starting to weave and make inroads in your branding, and even I don't want to put four questions in one question, but even conversation EQ, right? We got to talk about the name, but specifically, how did you set yourself up for success initially for those first 3, 6, 9, 12 months to be able to weather the storm of I'm a new business owner and I need to get to a client level where now I start getting paid?
Yeah. So great question, John. So you never want to come from a place of desperation, right? Where you're willing to do somersaults and backflips to get that first client because you have to pay your bills. So from the outstart, I made sure that I had enough resources to float and do things the right way and not the hurried way. So
Mm,
that's number one. You have to have some, kind of equity behind you so that you're really, really setting the table before you serve dinner, and that the dinner that you do serve is an excellent one. So that was a really key thing, and probably the reason I didn't do this years ago because it takes a long time to really sort of set yourself up and make sure that you not only have the strategic relationships, the network, um, you know, um, and the business and the content and the solutions developed to do it the right way. Um, I would say that the sales cycle is exactly the same. It's interesting because a lot of the clients within my network, you tend to think people, I think LinkedIn is a great tool to stay in touch with people, and that is how I have primarily always continued those relationships and have kept my reputation within the industry in the field. Um, a couple of clients that I'm talking to right now, they repeatedly refer to having come to me, whereas I actually think that I went to them, but it's a lot of word of mouth. So, maybe one client that I've worked with has actually, given me a referral. So it's really a lot of word of mouth, but ultimately that's how big companies work as well. I think in today's abundance of content, I mean, there's not an organization out there that does not have content around communication skills, right? You could use ChatGPT, et cetera. It's really the uniqueness of your solution and how you operationalize it for that client so that it's going to stick and
mm.
so that it's going to really be interactive and time well spent for people who are very busy, paid very well, so that they have skills they can immediately use on the job. And so that's how I differentiated myself. It was not theoretic, it was very application based. And a lot of that happens in the interaction with whatever we're doing, whether it's a virtual webinar or in classroom.
Nate. So, I caught something there too that makes me wonder. So, what are the KPIs that you look for, after a webinar or seminar has been done live? What type of follow-up do you have? What are some things that you've implemented that kind of separates you in that sense?
Yeah. So it's really not after the training. It's really from the onset. It's what happens before we actually engage and roll out any kind of solution. We're going to look at primarily four areas, and that's, who are the people that we really need, on the job? Do you have the right people? Are they in the right roles? Are you planning on hiring the right people? And then once you've identified that you do have the people that need to communicate. What are the gaps? What are the challenges? And then, more importantly, how will we develop based on those gaps and challenges? And we do that in a modularized, skill-based format. And then up front, I'll work with the client to identify how will we measure this? How will we know that this has been successful, both short term and long term? So, what are the things, if I were to wave a magic wand, I would see in a better world where people communicate more effectively? What would that look like? And then we'll put some metrics in place where not only we'll be able to inspect what we expect, right? But also get managers involved so that they're reinforcing these desired behaviors. And it's cyclical. So it's not just a training event. It's going to be coaching after the fact. So we'll have wraparound coaching interventions. And then, reinforcements through technology that will also give them the ability to use tools in order to really do it themselves.
Neat, neat. So you really become integrated in the company and really kind of another arm of what could be considered within either their sales force or education or HR. I mean, depends obviously what area you want to impact the most. I love that you set the stage with the client and do a lot of kind of upfront work so that when those people come in, I'm assuming, do you do any type of questionnaires or type of surveys before they come in, or?
Yeah, so we will typically work with the the executive sponsor to identify, kind of what the needs are, what are the challenges, and that's the needs analysis stage of working with a new client, for example. For the actual participants, we try to minimally give them things to work on before they come into training, but we do ask that they be thinking about some challenges, and that
Mhm.
really comes to life in the program.
Okay, neat, neat. So, I guess what's one of the things that you have really enjoyed the most of this process, right? Going from corporate to entrepreneur and seeing, yourself. I'm sure a lot of things have developed inside you that maybe you didn't even think about. But is there anything that stands out, that one or two things that you've gone, oh, okay, this is different than what I used to do, and I like that I grew in this way?
Yeah, so great question. So I would say that the thing that I enjoy the most about running a company versus working for a company, even though many of the things that you do in both roles are the same, because salespeople can be and should be very entrepreneurial, is really having the creative freedom to do some really cool things, to make strategic partnerships with people. Um, there's really no limit to what you can do in terms of creatively meeting the client where they need to be. Where that would be a big challenge in a larger organization to bring on a strategic partner. There's a lot of red tape, legalities that you have to put in place. I don't have those barriers.
Mhm.
Um, I would also say that part of the challenges is, I'm not a real technical person. uh, so I've learned a lot in terms of, setting things up, things that, you always had, a department that handled. Some of those back office things have been more work and probably not the most enjoyable aspect of my job, but it has helped me grow and keeps my brain alive, let's just say.
Yeah, I mean, look, that part of the Go for CEO community, we always learn this with every interview that we have on. It's interesting, right? Working in the business and working on the business. A lot of times when there's nothing wrong with working in a corporation, I think. If you're fulfilled and you're being able to work on something and in something, there's different challenges for each one of them, right? But now as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, you're doing everything in and on, right? And until you start to develop growth, capacity and capital to be able to bring on new people, or maybe you never do, but you see a vendor network that could stretch your value and bring more revenue. That might be a way that you do that as well. So, what are some thoughts over the next coming year of what you think Conversation EQ is going to be developing, or is there anything that would be a secret that's in there that you're maybe going to launch in the next, Q1, Q2, Q3 type thing, anything like that offhand?
Yeah, so definitely adding more technology to the solution. That's, I think, going to really add some of that stickiness in terms of reinforcement. Because, like any new behavior, it's like learning a new language. Essentially, practice makes perfect. So the easier you make that practice for somebody, the faster and closer you're going to get to that perfection that you really want to see at the end of the day in terms of creating a foundation that's going to help people be better communicators. Um, Also, some strategic partnerships that are really exciting. Things that are baked in. to the actual experience tie into the offering. So, for example, collaborative coaching events follow on to learning a new skill, where everybody has a voice in terms of helping coach each other. That's going to be something that you'll see in the next 6 months that we'll be offering at Conversation EQ.
I
And
love.
then I would, some of I do work with designers, instructional designers that are always learning the newest, coolest technologies, making classroom experiences be more interactive, more cutting edge. And I don't try to be the best at some of those things. That's why they're working on, those areas of the business. And I'm always open to their suggestions. So more to come.
Nice, nice. Well, I think you said something very important, right? I mean, when you're in business and you're scaling and you're developing a bigger and bigger marketplace for yourself, knowing that there are other people that have already developed in certain areas that you could bring in. I would say just even on the traditional side of being a salesperson, an assistant is a magnifier, right? I remember talking to some mortgage people back 15, 20 years ago, and I remember thinking to myself, like, why don't you have an assistant? You do, whatever, I don't know, call it 25 million of mortgages, right? Totally different, unrelated business. But I would always say you could do 50 million if you just had an assistant, because I
Right.
see how bogged down you are, right? And I think that as a CEO mindset, right, you're not only just running a business in it, you're running to work on it, right? So that you can develop those strategies and those vendor relationships. And like you said, maybe technology enhances some of the things that makes it sticky. A word that came to mind is immersion, right? You're immersing your client into that, and those people that take the course with you on the webinar and seminar, and now they have a stickiness and immersion that they can get into it. So really, really cool stuff. So hey, let's get to the what do they call it, 900-pound gorilla, like conversation EQ. Like I'd love to know, because branding, I had someone on the Go for CEO channel for branding, and they said name is everything. But then you think like Google, what the hell is that? Or like Apple, like how did that become so conversation EQ? Where was it development of? How did you think of it? And what finally landed in it? Was there different versions of it?
Oh gosh, there were so many different versions of my company name over the years. I think I owned at some point, 11 GoDaddy URLs, and I was always testing, with people that I knew. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And some of them were just awful looking back. And I thought at the time they were the best idea in the world. And so, I was playing with, kind of what I wanted to ultimately accomplish, and just sort of writing it down on paper. And then all of a sudden, Conversation EQ came up and the URL was available. I tested it with people and they said that's spot on because, that's what we all need is better conversations with, some emotional intelligence put into them. So it just stuck. And brand was really important to me because, again, this is not a consultancy, it is a training company.
Mhm.
So I do a lot of marketing around the Conversation EQ brand. And so far, I think it's sticking in a lot of people's conversations.
Yeah, no, the market's really enjoying it. I like you said, people that are connected to you see you on LinkedIn, and obviously we met at a live event, got a chance to speak to you, and get excited about what you're doing and having you on the channel. So, we love to end our interviews with part of the base of what Go for CEO is CEO, right? And that's client experience, engagement, and operational excellence. I really feel like in my own expertise with the businesses that I've run, or I've been an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur, those three areas are super, super impactful, right? And side note, selfishly, Go for CEO community, we are coming out soon with a consulting side. Kind of, we did some consulting incognito last year, but CEO will be a platform for that, and the book coming out. So shameless plug. But so C, client experience, communication EQ. What can people expect with their client experience when they're doing business with you?
Yeah. So, when you look at the training industry as a whole, 20 years ago, for example, everybody said we have the best content. And that was the big, banner. And then everybody said, well, we have the best instructors or facilitators that are delivering the content. And then everybody claimed that. To really the client experience is putting those two things together. So we have the best content. We also have the best people delivering the content. And it's based in neuroscience so that it really sticks and it makes sense to people. So I would say that that is kind of the client experience and what people can expect that's different. It's really pulling the best of those two worlds, content and delivery. Um, and that's really what leads to the operational excellence piece of the business, which is, or that engagement and the operational excellence. It's really, that's what they can expect and use skills immediately back on the job. In terms of the operational excellence, I started this organization and I said, I'm not going to hire people like consultants and project managers, because a project manager or a consultant or a trainer that is full time is going to be on different client accounts, and may not have the expertise on that given industry. So I have a large network of people that I work regularly with that are the best at what they do, and I source them accordingly. So if I have an organization that's in banking, for example, I'm going to pull the best of the best instructors that have banking experience. I'm going to get a project manager that's going to know financial services, et cetera. And so that's really the lean project operational model that I'm working with. And I think it lends very nicely into operational excellence.
Neat, neat. So, just to go a little bit deeper on the engagement side, so you have vendors, you have like you described, people that you're going to be able to utilize within these engagement that you go with your clients. Is there anything that you're doing that I guess you've seen it that really works, right? Really, from an emotional intelligence perspective, do you feel like gatherings and food and beverages and connecting is been something that's powerful for you to create those relationships? And engagement is really like, how do I engage with other human beings that bring us together, and why they want to then keep referring business to you or keep saying to you, hey, Ann, can you join me on this project? Or, oh, I'd love to be a part of your organization, that type of thing.
I think that relationships are everything, John. Really, it's a human need, evolutionary need to really connect with others. More important today, and it's really served me well, through my network, staying in touch with people, always being curious about what they're doing, and then being able to remember them and think of them when it comes time to needing a partner, a resource, a vendor. But I also see it on the client side, particularly following the pandemic. There's a lot of people just starved to build their networks and have that human experience, which is why we really do have an instructor led component that we go on site with. It costs money, but it really pays dividends in terms of building those networks and those relationships with people that you work with.
Interesting, interesting. So, well, thank you so much. I love to always share with our guests, how could people get a hold of you? We're going to be doing some shorts out of this long format video. We're going to post the long format video on audio and on video YouTube channel, on X, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. So, everybody that's listening in, please share this video, and also smash the like button and become a subscriber of the Go for CO channel. But and how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way? And if somebody's listening to this, they're like, man, I really want to bring Ann in to take care of my business. What can they do to connect with you?
Yeah, so you can go to www.conversationeq.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, and we can start there. There's a contact us form, and somebody will follow up ASAP.
Awesome, awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. And Go for CO community, we're just getting started in 2025. A lot of little wrinkles are coming out with the Go for CO brand and what we're doing. As I mentioned, the book should be out very shortly. We have a goal to get that out there That'll be kind of the calling card, and then some of the consulting stuff, all that type of stuff. But excited to bring incredible entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs, and stories like the one that Ann shared today. So thanks so much, Ann, for being a part of the Go for CEO channel.
Thanks for having me, John, and I'm excited to read your book.